This is Martin L. Shoemaker presenting the Instant Story Hour, where story comes first. And tonight, my lovely and talented assistant is Monalisa Foster, reading from her work. And take it away, Monalisa.
Hello, I'm going to be reading from chapter 13 of Threading the Needle. I need to set this up a little bit. When I'm referring to a phantom in this case, it's the ghost of a phantom limb that my character Talia has because she has lost her arm and has a prosthetic in its place. And we arrive at the part in the story where she has just finished killing a kidnapper who's kidnapped a young girl of about 6, and that kidnapper was a teenager. And we join her at the aftermath of the shooting. Talia sat beside the fountain, sipping a hot cup of chamomile tea. Someone had brought her the tea, put it in her hand. As she set down the white china cup with its tasteful swirls etched into it, there was a slight tremor. Hard to tell if it was the damage to the implant or not. She'd not shot anyone since getting her prosthesis. Almost a decade now, a record. Talia wrapped the fingers of her left hand around the prosthesis, using the thumb to massage the inside of the palm, the rest to massage the top. She'd always had tremors after it was all over. After was good. She'd always been like this, calm during, trembling after. That had not changed. Yet somehow it felt different. Slowly, the tremors worked themselves out of her phantom. She picked up and turned the spent 10mm cartridge over and over. Old habits die hard, and a sniper picked up her brass. No longer warm, it smelled of powder, defeating the softer scent of tea, defeating even the stronger scent of blood. Elliot had ordered everyone out of the garden. Someone had thrown a sheet over the corpse. The dark spot atop it gave it away, though. Dark center, the fibers soaked, fringed by rings of lesser red, surrounded by splatters. There was a thick sort of symmetry to it. She flexed her hands. The phantom seemed off once again, yet she'd made the shot. Maybe Faust was wrong, or the degradation wasn't going to matter. It was so tempting, wanting to believe that. She rolled the cartridge back and forth between thumb and forefinger like it was a fidget toy. Back and forth, over and over again. Up on the balcony, Rhodes and Elliot were talking, their unintelligible words drifting on the thick, blood-scented air. Rhodes must have said something to convince Elliot to let him through. Charmer, that one, no doubt about it. He made his way down the steps and came to sit beside her. Your reputation precedes you, Ms. Merritt. She took a sip of the tea. I'd like to hire you for a job, he continued. Elliot doesn't allow us to freelance, she said. Back and forth the cooling metal went. Surely he told you that. It's in our contracts. Conflict of interest. He smiled. Yes, but I'm not talking about a side job. I'm talking about something outside of Sakura, not a conflict of interest. Not much call for a bodyguard outside Sakura, she said. And you don't look like the kind of man who wants or needs one. Territorial dispute on the islands could use someone like you, someone with experience. Someone who can kill. That's what he really meant. The indentation made by the firing pin was like a little imperfection in the primer, like a pimple on a teenager's face. A face like the kidnapper's. Don't. It does no good. Old or young, it doesn't matter. Rumor is you have 300 verified kills, Rhodes said. 301 is up tonight. Back and forth, the cartridge went, sparkling in the light. She downed the rest of the tea, wishing it was something stronger. I just watched the security cam's recording. Excellent shot, by the way. He was going to kill that little girl. Was he? That's the way I saw it, Rhodes said. The way the police are going to see it too, assuming they ever get here. You saved the little girl's life today. I can tell that's important to you. Saw it in your face. How would you like to be a part of something that's going to make life better for everyone on Goridan? Make it better for all the children here, and for their children too. You could be a part of that. Do it for the children. What a familiar crock of shit that was. Sounds too good to be true, she deadpanned. Not this time, he said. People like me aren't usually called on to build things. What exactly are you offering me, Mr. Rhodes? The tip of her little finger could fit right inside that empty cartridge. Jared. Please call me Jared. I have a contract to bring armed security forces to one of the southern islands. My client is in dispute with a rival over the best way to move the territory forward. If he wins, it'll make it possible for us to bring all sorts of things to Gordon. Technology, medicine, education. It's lack of such things that's keeping young families from settling out there. Young families with young children, just like that little girl. That little girl doesn't have to worry about any of those things, Jared. She gave him a smile full of irony. The bastard was using pretty words and empty promises to tug on her emotions. She slipped the cartridge into her pocket. He smiled. Very true, Talia. May I call you Talia? But one of my employer's goals is to turn a wasteland into, well, a nice, safe place like Sakura. He wants to turn a frontier into a paradise. Rhodes made a gesture, his sleeve exposing his wrist as he did so, flashing a patch of red like tattooed blood drops. Undoubtedly, the gesture was meant to convey that their current surroundings constituted that very paradise, ignoring that it wasn't safe or they wouldn't have been having this conversation at all. She scoffed. A wasteland. Had he not seen the beauty and splendor she had when the ship had broken atmosphere? Who had he been talking to? Or did he really buy into what he was selling? The contract is for 5 years, he said. 1 million credits, enough to make you rich. 1 million credits. That was enough to buy her 10 implants. Maybe she should do just that, buy them in bulk. That's a lot of money, Jared. Not usually the kind of thing that comes with purely noble intentions. What's the catch? No catch. She pushed up from the stone bench. He put his hand on her wrist, like it didn't matter that it wasn't flesh and bone. It was a light touch, nothing she couldn't shake off. Instead, she held his gaze. No catch, Talia, he said. Just an obstacle. Local law, someone who fancies himself a sheriff, pinned the badge on himself and everything. But it shouldn't be too hard to deal with him. He's a drunk. Unfortunately, the local people can't see him for what he is. They're backing him up. I just need a few good people, like yourself, to deal with him. Show the locals what he's keeping from them. Where? Her gut knew the answer, knew it and still needed to hear it. Island of Tatarka. Town's name is, I believe, Surui. She winced. Sheriff's name in row by any chance? There was always a chance that someone else was sheriff now, or that he was lying, enticing her into an easy job. She knew Lyle, knew him well enough to know that he would never take to drinking. Yes. How did you know? Because your boss, Signora Contesti, isn't it? He tried to hire me a few months back. He gave me a different story, though. Thing is, he didn't quite tell me everything. His price has gone up quite a bit too, and apparently he didn't tell you everything either. Rhodes made a face like he didn't quite believe her, but let go of her arm. And what would that be? That Contesti has moved in with a lot of off-world money, that he's used, shall we say, questionable tactics to intimidate the locals, that he's tried to steal terraforming secrets. He gave her a brand look. You don't seem too surprised, Jared, or perhaps you don't care. Mercenaries, true mercenaries, usually don't. I think you've mistaken me for one of your own kind. Semantics. No one threads a needle like you do without feeling some bit of satisfaction, of pleasure. With her left hand, she belted him in the mouth. He landed with a thud and rolled over, his lips split. For a moment, she thought he was going to get up and fight. He wiped at the blood with the back of his hand, looked at it as if it surprised him, and laughed. Elliot came running down the steps. Something wrong here, Talia? Rhodes pushed himself up from the dirt, dusted himself off. Nothing to worry about, Mr. Elliot. Death's handmaiden was just showing me some He worked his jaw from side to side. Professional courtesy.
That's it.
That's it. That's it.
I see classic Mona Lisa elements there.
Really.
The strong, dangerous woman who's also very smart, and the society, the frontier. This is a society where people are having to somewhat make their own judgment, their own justice, their own security.
It's
And
very much so.
And although I don't know that it necessarily comes in here, I know from your marketing discussion before that it's definitely space opera feel, frontier feel.
It's basically, well, it's another planet. It's called Gordon. It's basically, I asked myself the question, what would happen if Japan was a planet?
Mm-hmm.
So this particular planet was settled with that in mind, with the mandate of preserving old Japan. So what we have is kind of this Meiji Restoration era, Old West feel, because those two milieus actually coexisted in history. Mm-hmm. So you have samurai and you have cowboys, and it recreates the Old West plausibly on this world.
Yeah, because it certainly in cinema, those two have fed off of each other. Because
absolutely,
a lot of it is the same code. Dave Wolverton, or Dave Farland was his pseudonym. He used to talk about genres in terms of their dominant emotion, which was an interesting approach. And he said when it came to Westerns, the dominant emotion was, or the dominant sort of theme was justice. That you're out in an area where justice is having to be worked out and settled. That there is no big formal policing, overarching infrastructure and everything. To a large degree, justice is still things people are working out themselves. Now, I kind of would expand that to, it's not justice alone, it's sort of the whole independence. You're out on this frontier, and if you want justice, you're going to have to make it. If you want to survive, you're going to have to make it. And so that's a little bit of what you get here, and again from the Meiji era, I think, as well.
It's very much about that, about those kind of values and that kind of a setting, and these people have left Earth and come to this planet specifically because they want to be independent. They want freedom, they want liberty, and they're willing to take, I guess, a downgrade in their lifestyle and their technology, and in order to get it. So imagine having that choice of being able to take somebody who lives 100 or a couple of 100 years from now and say, we have this place that you can colonize, but if you go there, you're going to have to go back to that late 1800s, early 1900s level of technology.
Now, is that being just imposed by fiat, or is it also part of the limitations of the travel and the economy and so on, that they can't, that no one can afford to be bigger than that yet?
It's more of a practical limitation. So the capital of the planet, which is called Sakura, it would be on par with what we have today, maybe a little bit more advanced. So the spaceships go to the spaceport there. There's cars there. There's cell phone towers. We would be very comfortable living in Sakura. But the further that you go out, the less technological it gets, because the reasoning is that if you don't have to maintain a high level of technology, you will be able to have this independence from Earth that the denizens of this planet want. So they're willing to go back to traveling on trains or riding horses. But at the same time, there are people who have the means to, for example, genetically engineer cows, which is one of the big goals of the people that are there. Is they're trying to terraform the biome, and they're going to be doing it using these genetically engineered cows that were engineered back on Earth and brought here as embryos. So there is this fusion of the old West and technology and space, like kind of like Firefly or Westworld, where they can coexist And in some instances, you're going to have that more primitive setting, and but also have little tastes of more advanced technology.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, with Firefly, they did it with different worlds at different technology levels, because I think TV science fiction just doesn't grasp how big a world is, that there is room for vastly different technology levels without ever having to leave one planet. But that was a show that the ship and the travels and everything were a big part of it. I'm going to confess that although I enjoyed some episodes, I didn't feel like it was the groundbreaking thing that so many people said it was, because in print science fiction, we've seen these concepts for decades. And so it was fresh and new on the screen, but it was like, okay, it's a really good presentation of things I've seen before.
Right. There were some things that were kind of murky for me too, because even though I really enjoyed the storyline and the characters were amazing and you were rooting for them and you really understood you understood Mal and Inara, there was in the back of my mind, because I'm always thinking about these things, is their idea of the verse just didn't make any sense to me, that you would have all of these life-bearing planets around one sun. They really didn't develop that part of it and answer it for me, but I still loved the series and the movie because the characters were just so fantastically well done.
Mm-hmm. I own the role-playing game. I think I still have a copy around here someplace, which gamers love all the nuts and bolts details because they want to optimize and find loopholes they can use for their character. And I got to tell you, I didn't make any more sense out of it after reading it. It's like, so they left Earth and they came here, or those who survived came here. Are they faster than light or not? It's not a game for people who are trying to get the nuts and bolts right. It's not a universe for people trying to get the nuts and bolts right. If you're going to think that way, you're in the wrong place.
Yeah.
The late Mike Resnick, I miss Papa Mike so much. There reached a point in his life where his wife Carol said, "We're not going to the movies anymore." Huh? We're not going to the movies anymore because I'm tired of sitting you yell at the screen the whole time for all the plot holes.
Guilty. I'm the same way.
Yeah.
My poor husband. Of course, try watching anything having to do with airplanes with him, and you kind of get the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I did different in this is, even though we have space travel and we are colonizing this planet and we have AIs, all of the weapons in this story are weapons that exist today. So Talia's personal gun is my favorite personal gun, the 1911. She's a sniper. She uses an old-fashioned sniper rifle that exists. So we don't have ray guns, and we have swords, because of course we do. I wrote it.
For those of you who have not seen her picture for the meetup event here from her webpage, it is Mona Lisa with a very fine Japanese sword extended out, ready to threaten an opponent. So of course it says you have swords.
Of course, I'm going to have swords. And that's one of the things I love about space opera, right? You can do so many different things with it. You can have cowboys and aliens and spaceships and swords all in the same story, as long as you make it make sense. And that's where, our job as a writer is. But there really is no limit to what you can do.
Mm-hmm. And it's a matter of, can you sell it? Can you make the story compelling so that the reader is looking and saying cool new things, as opposed to, huh?
Right. Right. And that's where I was going with Talia. I was trying to make, she's someone who has a very haunted past, but she hasn't let it redefine her. She is a woman who can do terrible but necessary things, that all without having lost her humanity. I didn't want to make her into a victim. I wanted to make her into a survivor. And
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who had gone through all these bad things and come out on the other end of it, and is just looking for a new life and a new beginning. and especially in a society like today's, where everything is tracked all the time and there's no way that you can really outrun your past. I can see where projecting that 50 or 100 years into the future, this idea of starting over, truly fresh, and actually being able to leave your past behind is going to be something that is going to be at a premium that people are willing to pay.
I think we're kind of there already. I do a fair amount of contemporary science fiction, and it's getting really hard for me to make a character believably disappear.
Yes.
That if somebody were to peek inside my brain, they'd start to worry about me, because I would be driving through small towns and it's like, I wonder if a hotel like that one checks ID. Could somebody actually hide out there for a while? And it's becoming more and more that the answer is no. There's no place in the continental US, unless you have connections and know how to do things black market. There's getting to be no place that somebody could just disappear like they might have 30 years ago.
I agree. And that actually makes it so much harder for us as writers, right? Even with, we make the mistake of having a character with really keen senses. Now nobody can sneak up on him, or there's no way for a character to actually be incommunicado because we all have cell phones that are constantly in touch. So it becomes harder and harder to spring things on them.
Yeah. We are still have a little time left in our interview, so I wanted to take a now direction off and go off in a different direction and talk about your recent Analog Award.
So that was for my first sale to Analog, and it was a hard science fiction story, that's First Contact. It's about an alien creature that's been stranded on this planet for a while, and a mathematician who discovers a signal coming from the planet, so they go out and check it. And I based the character on my daughter, who is actually a true-to-life mathematician.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you've got your science background. I don't know about your husband. You mentioned piloting, so that's a technical background, even if not a science background. So she comes by it honestly.
She does. She does. I was really surprised that she got into mathematics, because mathematicians are the people that physicists poke for fun. Mathematicians are fussy pedants, and we just love to torture them. So my daughter has had something like 7 or 8 semesters of calculus, and she far surpassed me about maybe 3 or 4 semesters into it, and I'm just looking at it going, because it's been like 30 years since I've had to do anything like that. And so I based this character on her, and the actual alien creature came out of a panel at Fantasy, where we were playing a game of basically building a creature to go up against the other team's creature. And we kind of pooled our ideas and came up with something that was somewhat like what ended up in this story. And it was just such a great vehicle for a lot of science, a lot of actual hard science.
Now, obviously, part of the story is discovering what this creature is like and how it behaves and what drives it and so on. So do you feel like you can, without spoilers, give us a hint of what's so different about it? I'm not sure I could. It is so much about that discovery.
It is. I mean, we get a lot of, so quantum entanglement is like a hot topic now. If you want to make something interesting, you just throw the word quantum out there, and and everybody's ears perk up. Same thing with AI. It used to be like that with nano. And basically it's a quantum entangled creature. And because of that, it can do certain computations very fast and use them to decode things. And that is actually one of the plot points, one of the reasons that we have the story solution that we have. So I don't think I could describe it well without giving it away either, which is why you should go read it. And it is available. It's still up. The story in its entirety is up on the analog site for anybody that wants to go read it.
Analogsf.com for those who haven't gone there before. So, and that was a fun story. I had the privilege of doing an early critique on it, and I could see you had something special there. I didn't see that it was going to be an AnLab reader because I don't have my fortune-telling glasses, but I could see you had something that was really thought out. That this was a thinking story and a feeling story.
And that's kind of what I usually go for. I'm really big on character development and characterization. Most of my stories are, I guess, human interest rather than ideas. What was really great about this one is that it was an idea story, but I don't think the idea really sells it, because unless you understand certain science, it's nowhere near as interesting as the human factor that's in it.
Are you familiar with Card's mice quotient?
Yes.
And I love that because it doesn't say you only have one of these for those who aren't milieu, which is your location, your setting, and idea and character and events. And what his point was is that every story has all of these. It's where your emphasis is. If you don't have an interesting idea, you've got my story I mentioned offline of characters going to school to study for a test. Yay. So you want an engaging idea that makes people think, but you got to have that the character side of it, to be able to make them feel and care. Because otherwise, we're past the age when a cool puzzle was enough to sell a story. That cool puzzle appeals to 500 engineers across the country. Your audience had better be a lot bigger than 500 if you want to grow in this business.
I agree.
So you're pulling in the characters that they have stakes about solving this puzzle.
Right. And while the alien has much bigger stake than his human counterpart in the story, really the most difficult part of this for me was making the alien come across as alien but still relatable. Because I think a real alien, I think this is one place where the story diverges from reality, is I think a real alien would be something so incomprehensible to us that we might as well be ships passing in the night. It's a big universe, it's a big sky. For two creatures to come to be in the same place at the right time and actually be able to communicate and connect, that's pure fiction. But you need that. You need that because ultimately your readership is human, and they want things that they can relate to.
Yep. And you did it very well. And so, yes, go pick that up and see why she won the award. I do not believe you will be disappointed to read that story. So,
thank you.
Got about a minute left. Anything else you wanted to have people know about you and your work before we switch over to the Instant Story Hour?
I write across a variety of genres. I write different types of space opera, not just something like Threading the Needle, which is basically a mix of space opera, military SF, and space western. I also write hard SF and alt history, and I've dabbled in other genres. So just fair warning, I write across a wider spectrum of stories, but I do focus mostly on the same thing, which is of having characters and having them have the kind of problems that we can all relate to. So that's my unifying thread about my writing.
And I would say, because I haven't read everything you've said, but I would say from the samples I have read that there's a very definite theme of honor and integrity running through these as well. That's something your characters struggle with and try to aspire to.
I like to torture my characters, and that's how I do it.
Yeah. So, all right. So we are ready now to get into the second half of the show, the Instant Story Hour, where you have prepared for me a prompt, character and a setting and a problem, and I will start to improvise a story from that. And we will see if I can fall on my face or if I can actually turn it into probably not a complete story because we've only got a half hour left here. I finished episode 1 on Tuesday, and it was 25 minutes recorded here in the show, and it was 85 minutes recorded after. So this is more of a story opening than a story.
Okay. And I'm rubbing my hands together because I tailored this one specifically for you.
Okay.
So Princess Mariko, a highly skilled surgeon, is alone and marooned on a spaceship where all of the amenities have quit working. Princess Mariko never learned to cook and must now figure out how to make do.
All right, so we have Princess Margot on a spaceship where everything is broken down and she doesn't know how to cook and she needs to be able to survive here. And you said she's a surgeon, right?
She's a highly skilled surgeon, but she doesn't know how to cook. So this is her challenge.
Okay. Princess Margot glared at the food system. Period. My apologies. I dictate and transcribe using Dragon Naturally Speaking, and Dragon Naturally Speaking does much better if I speak my punctuation, period. And so I've become really good at this, comma, even though some people find it very difficult, period. For me, comma, it becomes effortless, period, almost too much, period, to the point where I find myself speaking my punctuation when I shouldn't, period, especially when I'm talking to a computer, comma, but even sometimes talking to people, period. It's a bad habit, comma, but it happens to be productive for me, period. New line, new line. Princess Margot glared at the food storage system, period. This was not what she was hoping for on this trip, period. New line. Of course, comma, nothing about the trip was, period. Here she was on her way to visit the new hospital on Wotan 7, where she would hopefully get the position of chief surgeon, period. And the Wotanians, comma, with their hyper advanced technology, comma, saw no problem with sending a single ship to escort her, period. She thought this would be a casual, fun trip, comma, but she at least thought there would be another person on board that she could talk to, period. New line. Now, to be fair, comma, there had been a Wotan pilot, comma, and he would have been good company, period, and he would have understood the systems of the ship, period. But ironically enough, comma, he was struck with appendicitis 2 hours before they had to leave Earth, period. Yes, comma, despite decades and generations of genetic engineering, comma, the human body still sometimes let its owner down, period. Fortunately for the pilot, comma, he was transporting one of the best surgeons around, period. She was in a good position for an emergency appendectomy, dash, dash, no, comma, not on the ship, comma, in the nearby clinic, dash, dash, and he would be just fine in a couple of days of recuperation, period. The Wotan 7 wanted her to come and interview for their hospital now, period. New line. She sighed, period. And of course, comma, they trusted their automatics, period. Who doesn't trust their automatics? Question mark. She glared at the storage unit again, period. Smart people, period. Smart people didn't trust their automatics and had backups, period. And this, ... New line. All she had asked for was Thai food with pineapple, period. Apparently that was beyond the comprehension of the food system, comma, and it started pulling in additional power, period. Don't people put pineapple in their meals these days? Question mark. She did, comma, at least, period. She still remembered her wonderful youth in Hawaii, where pineapple was part of everything, period, and she'd never shaken the habit, period. New line. But here, ... There's no pineapple on board, period. The synthesizer didn't know the actual formulation for pineapple, period. It started drawing in spare processing power, period. And suddenly, comma, systems across the ship started going dark, period. New line. Including the drive system and the comms, period. New line. And suddenly, comma, for want of a simple chunk of sweet and sour food, comma, she was stranded in the middle of hyperspace with no idea how to proceed, period. If they had been in normal space, comma, she probably would have been in dire straits, comma, but at least she would understand the physics, period. Transdimensional physics had always eluded her, period. It was something she half didn't believe in, period. She thought that they might as well be traveling by magic, period. New line. That gave her a chuckle, comma, at least, period. She had grown up with the old islanders, comma, those who had set themselves apart from the rest of the world and held to the old ways, period, of spirits, comma, and of ancestors, comma, and of forces that you could control if you had the right attitude and the right discipline, period, and if you didn't piss them off, period. That was an era that she still remembered, comma, even though it was generations lost in the rest of the world, comma, it was what she had grown up with, period. She had disappointed her mother and all of her aunts when she had left Hawaii, not just for the white world, comma, but for medicine and for space, period. Her mother had never stopped loving her, comma, but she had never started understanding, period. New line. So here, comma, in this physical magical realm of hyperspace, comma, she was stopped, period. Or was she, question mark? She did not understand the transportation at all, period. She had thought that transportation through hyperspace was instantaneous, period. But the Wotanians had disabused her of that quickly, period. It was not a simple jump from one point in space to another. It was a jump through a higher space, period. Or was it a lower space, question mark? Their analogies seem to imply both, period. A higher space you would think would be longer trips, comma, but they said this was a shorter trip, period, but not zero, period. New line. So was the ship just going through hyperspace on some sort of a tram line that would take her to the other end? Question mark. Or did the ship have to navigate through hyperspace? Period. Was that, question mark, was that the secret, that the computer guided along some course that used some sort of beacons that only transdimensional physics could pick up? Question mark. She didn't understand, comma, and she never would, period. Of course, comma, she wondered if any of the ship's designers would ever understand how to rewrite genetics so that you could eliminate a disease from a bloodline, period. Everyone had their own specialty, period. New line. Her specialty, comma, surgery, comma, would certainly have been helpful in any number of emergencies, period. But this, this left her completely without any path forward, period. New line. She picked up her bowl, comma, and in a fit of ire that would have embarrassed her mother, comma, she slammed it down upon the desk, period. All I wanted was a little bit of pineapple! Exclamation point. New line. She slammed the bowl down again, and something yellow and wet splashed out, period. New line. What was that? Question mark. New line. She saw the yellow cube sitting in heavy syrup on the desk, period. It was indubitably a chunk of new line. No, comma, that was ridiculous, period. That was inconceivable, exclamation point. There was no way there was any new line. Then the smell hit her nose, comma, and Margot realized just how hungry she was, period. It would have embarrassed her mother, comma, but she reached out, comma, picked the chunk up in her fingers, comma, and sniffed it, period. New line. It wasn't just pineapple, comma, it was fresh pineapple, period. She had smelled pineapple just off the farm, comma, sliced open with her own machete, comma, and carved out, and she had tasted the juices dripping down her chin, period. And this was that, period. New line. She checked her pulse, period. Then she checked her temperature, period. Then she started reciting the alphabet backwards, period. And then she started going through the Krebs cycle, period. Her brain was functioning, comma, but how could it be? Question mark. This was impossible, period. Pineapple from nowhere, period. New line. She checked the food storage system again, period. The automatic door was still sealed, comma, waiting for her to punch in another command, period, or to cancel the existing command, period. Had somehow this system produced a chunk of pineapple in thin air and dropped it in her bowl? Question mark. That was not how the system normally worked, period. She put the bowl in, comma, and the system mixed available ingredients and synthesized substitutes, comma, dispensing them into the bowl, period. It did not toss food around, period. New line. All right, we're at a pretty good 15-minute point here now for you to throw me a curveball, although I think I've thrown myself a pretty big curveball already.
I was going to say, I'm not sure you need any more challenges, or Mariko for that matter. We might not be able to, get her out of this.
I am remembering on stories past that sort of inspired this. So I can just go with this as a curveball if you like, or if you want to throw another one in.
No, I'm good with what you got.
All right. Finally, comma, she could resist no longer, period. She took a small bite, dash, dash. One never took a small bite of pineapple, comma, but she took a small bite, period. It had the right taste, period. New line. All right, comma, this was the pineapple from nowhere, period. She couldn't explain it, comma, but she was a doctor, period. She could analyze it, period. New line. Resisting the urge to swallow, comma, she took the chunk back to her cabin and opened up her surgical kit and the diagnostic kit that came with it, period. She put the pineapple onto a dish so that she wouldn't get juice all over her cabin, comma, and then she pulled out and unfolded the microscope, period. In the base of the scope were slides and slide covers, comma, and there was a scalpel in the surgical kit, comma, of course, period. Like she hadn't had to do herself in many a year, dash, dash. It was good to have staff, dash, dash. She started carefully slicing a tiny chunk of pineapple as thinly as she could, period. New line. She was out of practice, exclamation point. The first slice was far too thick, comma, and the second was just what she would barely tolerate, period. It took 3 tries to get a slice that would do well on the slide, period. New line. She put the slide cover on top of the small slice of fruit, comma, and put it on the bed of the microscope, period. Then she tapped the button to turn on the light, comma, and she dialed the lens up to the top, comma, put her eye to it, comma, and started slowly dialing down until she could focus, period. New line. Fortunately, comma, it was an excellent microscope with good safety guards, period. The lens did not smash into the slide, period. It stopped just short, period. And throughout that entire traverse, she had to have missed something, period. Slowly, she started dialing the microscope back up, period. At the top, she brought it back down one more time, period. New line. Then she sat back, comma, rubbed her eyes, comma, and looked at the slide, period. There was absolutely a slice of yellow fruit on the piece of glass, period. New line. And there was nothing at all through the microscope lens, period. New line. Princess Margot was old school, period. She did still know how to do lab work when she had to, period. And that included calibrating your equipment, period. So that meant she had some simple rice paper and other small samples she could use on the microscope just to get things focused in and make sure everything was working. So she picked up the small slice of red dyed rice paper and put it onto another slide, period. New line. When she put that one in the microscope, comma, she hardly needed to look through the lens, period. The light that she saw as soon as it was visible at all was red, period. The rice paper was there, period. New line. Next, comma, very carefully, comma, she shaved off a little bit of her thumbnail and put that on a slide, period. And she saw all the keratin and dead cells of the thumbnail, period. New line. She put the pineapple slide back, comma, and she saw nothing but white light passing through glass, period. Through the instrument, comma, there was nothing there at all, period. New line. Again, she checked her pulse, period. Again, she recited the Krebs cycle, period. If this were insanity, comma, it was a specific insanity where everything around her was normal, comma, except that one piece of fruit, period. It was perfectly normal to her gross senses, comma, but it was not visible through her instrument, period. New line. Well, comma, not through the microscope, period. She grabbed her, and I forget the name of it, the optical light the doctors use.
The pen light?
Pen light, thank you. She grabbed that and looked through the lens, and there was pineapple. As she drew closer, it faded away to nothing, period. New line. Pineapple's acidic, comma, right? Question mark. She pulled out a slice of litmus paper, and she put the paper on the desk and dribbled a little bit of the pineapple juice on it, period. The paper turned dark as if it was damp, comma, but the color did not shift at all, period. And then, comma, as she watched further, comma, the dampness evaporated as if the paper had never been wetted, period. New line. Now she was starting to wish her mother was around, period. Not because her mother knew a slightest thing about hyperspace, comma, but because she wanted to wrap her arms around someone and tremble, period. This was now not just a matter of life and death, comma, but a matter of reality itself, exclamation point. She found herself in a place where none of the rules made any sense, period. And she had no way, no idea of how to escape, period. New line. All right, we're a little early here, but I think this is a really good closing hook for now. So
very nice.
Thank you.
Corgi-san came in to express his approval of your story. You
Hello,
were talking about food. And very, very interested in all forms of food, even fictional food.
Okay.
In hyperspace. He said so.
Does he eat pineapple?
He will eat anything that is food or food adjacent or has been near food or around food.
We had a Cocker Spaniel who my dad brought over some carrots, defective carrots, the ones you can't put in the store, but for the horses. Horses don't care if it looks funny. A big bucket of those. And the Cocker Spaniel had been warned those were not for him, but he sat right next to that bucket and growled at anybody who approached that bucket. Because if he couldn't eat, nobody could eat.
That sounds about right. That sounds about right.
No.
I mean, who can blame him, right? Carrots are delicious.
Yeah. And he was another one of those that he'd pretty much eat or at least try anything. And it's like he might decide that's not food, but it was very rare.
Corgi-san is very, very much like that.
Oh. All right. That's basically what we've got for tonight. I will get around to finishing this one. It's probably going to be a couple of weeks now. I just finished episode 1, the dictation for after the show. I finished that on Tuesday, and I still have to do the cleanup of the transcription. And then so that was episode 1, which was the eclectic cool wave acrid mess, which is an illusion that I don't know if any audience is going to get these days. That was one about a first responder in a essential oils plant, and all the people disappeared.
Yeah, I remember that one.
And I have to get next to the one which I'm calling Interviews with Death, which is a mission planner on the moon trying to plan a new mission, and he's got very little time, so he has to go through the candidates quickly, and one of the candidates has disappeared. And I guess with a title like Interviews with Death, you can guess that the person's probably not having a good day. And then last week's was Hotel Kaiju. The illustrator last week actually was my first illustrator. She said, I want an artist underwater and there's a tsunami coming. And then the curveball she threw, because it was an artist basically had been hired to do a mural on an underwater hotel, and the whole documentary and everything that is part of the publicity for the hotel. They want to actually have her paint it underwater while they film and everything. So that was all great. And then there's a tsunami coming, so she has to go to shelter, and she's not happy about this. And then for the curveball, the illustrator said, and it's not just a tsunami. And my brain said, a curveball, it's just not just a tsunami. I think it's a kaiju. And so, and I'm not a kaiju fan. I really am not. It's just I'm too much of a hard science fiction guy. I could go on for hours on all the ways they break science, but it's what the story called for. So it takes me.
I get that.
Go ahead.
I said I get that. The kaiju not making sense.
Yep. I was maybe 9 or 10 when I read an article by Ben Bova, although I didn't know who he was at the time, on designing realistic monsters and the square cube law. And that stuck with me from 9 or 10, that I cannot build giant monsters without coming up with a body design that allows us not to violate square cube law. In Bova's example, he started with, let's make a giant lobster. And by the time all was said and done, it looked a lot like a Tyrannosaurus, because a Tyrannosaurus is a body style built for something that big.
I think I know this article.
Yeah,
I remember it.
It was very formative for me, and so I don't do well with giant monsters. I have to say, as kaiju go, Godzilla is at least squat with big legs and big feet. So he's sort of giving some nod to square cube law. He's still, I mean, it's fantasy. It's not science fiction.
I agree.
And as I say about many different stories, they don't need me and their audience to be successful. They've got many, 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 many millions of people who don't see it my way. And I've got people who don't like my stuff. It's just the way it is.
I agree, and that's the same with me too. And I enjoy things in different ways, and sometimes that enjoyment comes from taking something apart and going through why it can't. That's a form of enjoyment too, because really, if you think about it, I'm taking the time to do this. The opposite of not enjoying it would be to ignore it altogether and just be indifferent to it.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, I thank you. And next week, people can join us. For those who are not in America celebrating the 4th of July, I was going to take the week off because Thursday's the 4th. But Sean Hazlett said, yeah, I want that. I will do that. So next week will be Sean Hazlett. And he is, of course, an editor and a writer and a podcaster who a lot of what I know about podcasting is trying to follow in Sean's footsteps. So
he's a great guy.
Yep. All right. So I thank everyone, and I will turn off the recording and call it a night.
Night.